the doyen of commentators on the Persian Gulf, on the Middle East region further, and indeed on many other things, is Professor Seyed Marandi, the head of the American Studies Department at the University of Tehran. And it's always an honor and a pleasure, sir, to welcome you back on the Mother of All Talk shows. Thanks for joining us. Can you begin with a description of the atmosphere in Iran right now? Are people resigned to the likelihood of conflict, hopeful that it will be avoided, or are some actually even seeking it, determined to lance this boil once and for all? Just paint a picture for us, if you will.
I think you can find all three among ordinary Iranians. Those who are a bit nervous, those who think that if the United States strikes Iran, Iran has the ability to hit it back hard and end this once and for all. And those who are getting on with their lives who don't really think anything is going to happen. But one thing I think is quite clear, and that is that people are rallying behind the armed forces, and they see Trump as a troublemaker and as a supporter of genocide and as someone who's completely unreasonable. He has not made it easy for himself with this sort of behavior. He has united Iranians because all Iranians know that his demands, the demands of Trump, are completely unreasonable, and that the United States is a regime that invades countries that have weak armies and weak armed forces. So I think in general, it's quite clear that people will fight back if there's battle, but I think most believe that there won't be a war. I think that is highly unlikely, because if there's going to be war, the Americans are going to have to bring in well over 1 million soldiers, and they're going to have to bring their Navy and their Air Force from across the world. This is not the United States of the 1990s. They don't have that financial capability, and their rivals, including not just Iran, but Russia and China, they are much stronger today than they were 20, 30 years ago. The United States, we see what's going on with the stock markets and the trade war. It's just a very different world. And U.S. client regimes in the Persian Gulf, they know quite well that if there's a war between Iran and the United States, that their regimes will crumble, some within hours and most within days, and the global oil and gas markets will simply go through the roof and the global economy would collapse. So it's difficult to imagine a war. There could be airstrikes, but even those would be difficult, because I find it highly unlikely that the Americans will use Turkish airspace, even though Turkey has worked alongside the Israelis and the Americans during these years. But that's highly unlikely. Iraq, if anything happens there, there would be rebellion. And in the Persian Gulf, these countries would face the consequences. All the Americans could do would be to send a few B-2s or B-52s from Diego Garcia, and that would be roughly 5,000 kilometers. The flight would be about 5,000 kilometers to get to some place like Esfahan. And that would make them very vulnerable, and a few airplanes that are vulnerable really can't do the sort of damage that the Americans want them to do. We've already seen how in Yemen they failed. They've been unable to damage the underground missile sites and drone sites in Yemen. All they've done is destroy civilian infrastructure, homes. They've murdered people. They've brought down apartment buildings, and they've destroyed water installations for the general public. But they've been unable to deter the Yemeni armed forces, which are heroically fighting back. So if they cannot win in Yemen, I find it completely impossible for them to win against Iran.
It does, though, potentially lower the nuclear bar, doesn't it? your friend and mine, although we have disagreements with him nowadays, Scott Ritter. He actually named two essentially dirty bombs that the United States had tailored precisely for the purpose of busting the Iranian bunkers. Do you worry about that?
Not really, George. The world is already turning against the United States and the West in general because of Gaza. The world is turning against the United States because of the trade war. Nuclear weapons would change the situation completely across the globe. But also, Dr. Larijani, who is a senior advisor to the leader and who used to be the Speaker of Parliament and who was also once the head of the Supreme National Security Council, he came on television a few nights ago and said that if the United States attacks Iran's peaceful nuclear program, Iran will produce a nuclear weapon. And this is the first time anyone has said that openly and clearly. But he also said something that didn't get noticed, and that was that he said that if the Americans struck the Iranian program, it would not set it back. In other words, he was implying that the Iranians would be able to, even with an American strike, they would be able to build nuclear weapons. And since the Iranians are highly advanced technologically speaking, their missile capabilities, I think everyone knows, we've seen how they fired almost 200 missiles towards the Israeli regime and all got through the defenses. The Iranian missile capability, the Iranian nuclear capability is as such that if Iran develops a nuclear weapon, then that changes everything. But again, the Iranians don't want to develop weapons. Dr. Larijani said, we do not need weapons. And the logic that Iran has always put forward was that it is an immoral weapon. That's why there's a fatwa during the Iran-Iraq war when Saddam Hussein was using chemical weapons given to him by the West. The Iranian leader refused to produce chemical weapons, even though he was under pressure. He was being pressured by senior politicians and people in the military. He gave a fatwa against it. Iran didn't produce chemical weapons back then. And now the fatwa is against nuclear weapons. And also, in addition to that, Iran knows that if it produces nuclear weapons, that creates an environment in Central Asia, the Caucasus, the Arabian Peninsula, and elsewhere for other countries to pursue nuclear weapons. And that is destabilizing. So for Iran, the ideal situation is to have a peaceful nuclear program and no nuclear weapons. But the threat that Dr. Larijani made was a deterrence of sorts in order to make Trump understand that it will be his behavior that determines whether Iran has nuclear weapons or not.
What did you make of Donald Trump's little video, this snuff movie that he put out on Twitter? I mean, to say it was degrading and unbecoming of president of any country, never mind the USA, is to state the obvious. But what's the reaction in the region been to that?
Which particular clip are you speaking about?
The clip where he boasts that he's just wiped out in broad daylight an Eid grouping in the open air, and he calls them Houthis getting instruction on the sinking of American ships. They were tribal people with knives in their belts, that's all.
It's absolutely disgusting. And it is amazing how the Western media, the American media, is ignoring this and pretending as if nothing has happened, as if they haven't been lied to by Trump. And it is very interesting that the liberal media in the United States, they are hostile to Trump on any issue. They will attack him. But when it comes to slaughtering people in Yemen or to slaughtering people in Gaza, they're quiet. And the protests even, those protests that we saw against Trump yesterday, I think, They said nothing about Gaza. They said nothing about Yemen. They said
No.
nothing about Lebanon. It's stunning that in the United States, mainstream media and mainstream uh, political activists, I don't mean the Democratic Party, that they would be so inhumane when it comes to these atrocities. It was clear, as you rightly pointed out, that this was a tribal gathering. Where were the missiles? What does this gathering, even if they had machine guns in their hands, even if they had RPG-7s in their hands, what would that have to do with the Red Sea? Firing surface to sea missiles are not the sort of thing that these people would be able to do. They come from underground bases. They have radar installations. They quickly set them up. They fire their missiles and go away. Why would they be standing in a circle? It's clear. Anyone who uses a search engine would see that this is the traditional way in which tribes gather together. But the Americans don't care, George. You know that better than I. They bombed weddings in Iraq. They bombed weddings in Afghanistan. They helped the Saudis bomb funerals in Yemen. They've been doing this for decades now, and they get away with it. But the difference is that once upon a time, we had to have WikiLeaks show us a clip of a crime in Baghdad, and then the head of WikiLeaks went to jail. But now the war criminal himself posts his crime on Twitter and boasts about it, and so do hundreds of thousands of Americans who went and liked or retweeted the images, the footage.
Yes, talking of footage, the Israelis, you and I know, most of the viewers know, Israel is built on a lie. It's built on a fundamental lie that Palestine was a land without people and they were a people without land, and therefore they ended up there. So it's built on a lie. And monstrous constructions of lies have been erected over many decades. But it has begun to be impossible for Western media to avoid the truth when the video of the massacre of 15 health workers who were then buried with their ambulances, and a video taken by one of the murdered men. Do you see it as a bit of a turning point?
I wish I could see it that way, but we saw Hind, for example, the young 6-year-old girl, the way in which she and her family were slaughtered and nothing happened. We saw hospitals bombed. We saw how they lied about underground tunnels. We saw them lie about everything, and nothing happened. I do think it's a turning point of sorts. We've had many turning points, and that is with regards to public opinion. The Israeli regime is despised. And I believe that actually restarting the genocide made it worse, because there was a universal sigh of relief that the slaughter died down. It didn't stop, but it died down. And then when it restarted, people were again outraged. This particular case was something that made people outraged, where even the New York Times had to, they posted the footage. I can't say to their credit, because they are very much a part of this genocide. But I saw the BBC and the New York Times, the titles that they used that the Israelis admitted that they made a mistake. They didn't make a mistake. We all knew that they had done this on purpose. They were just stupid. They were like ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria. Jolani's people, they filmed themselves carrying out atrocities. These Israeli soldiers were too stupid to go and find the cell phones or the video, find the video footage and destroy them so that we wouldn't be able to see them. But I do think we have had many turning points. I think this is the beginning of the end of the Israeli regime. I'm not saying it will end tomorrow or next year, but people across the world despise it. When you have no, when you're despised, when people see you as a monster, I cannot conceive how such an individual could continue with life in a normal manner. For yourself, George, or for me, our honor, our dignity is probably the most important thing that we have. If that is taken away from us, then what is left? And the regime itself and those Zionists who support the regime and who overwhelmingly support the genocide, people will never forgive them. And they will see when they travel abroad, they will see how people despise them. People will not want to. I just came back from China. In China, they're despised. And this was not the case 2 years ago. I would have debates and discussions trying to convince people about the nature of the regime 2 years ago. Now it's universal. Everyone is just disgusted. And that, I think, is the biggest defeat that the regime has faced over the past, 19 months now.
Now, finally, in my introduction, Professor, I did say that you were an expert on many things, even way beyond the portfolio that you hold and the region in which you live. So, if I may, what do you think of Trump's promise to bring about an end to the Ukraine war? Do you think it's heading in the right direction, albeit more slowly than he said? He said he could do it in 24 hours. But do you think it's moving in the right direction? Can we hope for an end to the slaughter there?
Well, I'm still a student of yours, and so I learn from you, but I'm skeptical. Ultimately, the war will end, but I'm skeptical that it will end so quickly. And I think that we are seeing, so far at least, that Trump has not been able to take the necessary steps to end the war. I think it's quite clear that the Russians have grievances and they've made huge sacrifices, and they're not going to just simply accept a ceasefire and walk away. They've lost too many young men, and the reasons why the war began in the first place have not been removed. And Trump should by now understand that. Trump wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to be friends with Russia and change the relationship, which is understandable, but he wants to have that relationship on his own terms. And I think that that's just simply not possible. So unless the United States becomes more realistic about the situation in Ukraine, then I'm afraid that the war will continue, more people will die, and ultimately, I believe that the Ukrainian government will not survive.